word psychedelic was a word that was created in the 1900s. Like someone made the word up by combining these two Greek words, psyche and delos. So psyche is like mind, or everyone knows what psyche is, but delos I guess means to manifest. So psychedelic means manifestation of the mind, essentially. So on the one hand, there's like psychedelic drugs and substances which can be used to create that kind of a state, like where your mind is manifesting imagery or like different kind of perception. But that's only one. It's just psychedelic is just an adjective, and it refers on one hand to those kind of drugs, but also to like the experiences that you have on them. But it can also just refer to like a state of mind or a sort of way of perceiving things, and it doesn't require drugs to reach that state. So I feel like on the one hand, it's kind of misinterpreted that like anytime the word psychedelic is used, it's referring to drug use, because really it's what it's referring to is like an altered sense of perception, but that's, chemicals are only one way of achieving that, and definitely not the most sustainable way, And then musically speaking, or artistically speaking, like, to me, as someone that has a lot of experience with psychedelic states, both from chemicals and from other ways of achieving them, such as like meditation and breath work and dream work and yoga and fasting and like automatic writing and rituals and all kinds of other ways of getting in that kind of headspace, and playing music itself can be very psychedelic. But like, I think that the word is used to describe music at this point in time, I feel like in a pretty shallow way, and so people think a lot of the time when it's like this new psychedelic band, it's sort of like referring to like the fact that they like use an echo pedal, or that they like wear like flowery shirts or something. It doesn't actually have to do with how it sounds. Where to me, like a lot of music that I think of as psychedelic, the people probably never heard Pink Floyd or like necessarily did any drugs, but it's just the music is coming from a spiritual place, and so it alters your consciousness. Like my girlfriend Amanda takes photographs, and a lot of her photographs have a psychedelic quality, but it's not because there's like mirrored images and lots of effects on it. It's just because it captures a certain state of mind in a simple way. So it's like psychedelic can be much more subtle than like really affected guitar solos or like crazy colors, Surrealism and like Dadaism and like early art movements like that I'm really interested in, we're definitely tapping into psychedelia. And that was like Dadaists and Surrealists were around the time that LSD was being invented, which is interesting, but they weren't relying on those chemicals, but they came up with other methods of kind of like tripping out your brain, basically, like for instance like writing games where one person writes a word and then the other person doesn't see what it is, and they write a word, and then when you put them together, the combination, like sort of randomness, and it just alters your brain a little bit. Like those are some really cool versions of what psychedelic is to me that are kind of overlooked. Automatic writing, or like sort of like random word association, or things like that. Like collage. Like collage is a big part of it too. I make collage, but like putting this idea next to this idea creates a weird effect on your brain, and that's psychedelic. I mean, partially that's inspired by this like old American gospel music, like Charlie Patton, who's a blues singer, but he also sang gospel songs, and he had a song called Prayer of Death. So like the song Prayer of Death that I wrote, but it's the title is inspired by Charlie Patton. But at the time that I made that was the first album where the whole band played on the record. it was, prior to that it was my solo project, but then, and I had played with both Derek and Paz kind of separately, and on that record we all came together and started to sound like a band, but at the time that we were recording those songs, just sort of that theme was resonating with me a lot. This is kind of a crazy story, but like the song Prayer of Death itself, which is the title of the album too, I wrote that when my younger brother is like a rock climber and a hiker and like traveler, and he was missing basically at that time. He had gone on this hiking, like camping type of excursion, and no one in my family heard from him in like a couple weeks. And I started getting this like really strong feeling like, what if I never see him again? Like what if he's missing, or what if he's gone here? And so, yes, like so that song came to me, and I recorded the song, and then after I recorded the song, he just like called and was like, "Hey, I'm having a great time on this trip." But so in this, he was fine. But in the song, I talk about like wanting to meet my brother in this like the world beyond and all this stuff. And right before I started playing with Paz, her brother had actually passed away, and I never got to meet her brother. But through being close with her and knowing her in the aftermath of that, that's someone that, like, even though I've never met him, I feel like I know him, and I play his guitar, they belong to him, and so in a way, like, without even thinking about it, I was like writing the song as myself, but I was also taking on, or like connecting with her feelings and writing a song like kind of through, or like she wrote the song through me, or like her experience came through me. I don't really know how to explain it. So some of this like background of what that album is about too is like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is basically like a manual for living people to help guide the souls of people who just died, like out of the intermediary world that you go to right when you die into another incarnation. Apparently, like in Tibet, they had over a long period of time, they mapped out like where you go before you get reincarnated, and so they, I guess, knew how to give you advice to the souls that were hanging out between lives. So that's like partially what it's about. I'm not really sure, like, from my own experience, how I feel about reincarnation, but I feel like one thing that I definitely can tell is that like belief in reincarnation doesn't really have any bad effects. Like whether it's true or not, like usually people that believe in that are happier, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Because the fear of death is a big part of life, but like your level of peace and happiness in life seems to relate to your amount of fear or worry or sort of about death. So right. Like if you don't really understand it but you feel like probably you'll be back, then it's not as big of a deal. So whether it's true or not, it seems to help people like to think that, There's a lot of stories that I've read that are pretty crazy about like people remembering things from the past that they had no reason to know, and feeling like they must have been this other person in a past life and things like that. But even if that's just like memories that we have in ourselves, or like sort of like memories that we pick up psychically, even though like I wasn't necessarily this person before, but I could still like tap into their experience, that's still like just that feeling that there's something more than what we understand I think is like helpful to have, rather than being like, because I can't prove that, I'm not going to believe in it. Just being open to the possibility of those things seems to be like a healthier approach. Probably the motivation for creating songs or creating anything, like in a specific way, it seems to change over time. Or like at a different time in my life, I'll be inspired by a different thing. Or like, but then if you zoom out from that and just go back to like what motivates all of it is, at least for me and for a lot of people that I know who are like artists or musicians in like a full-on way, they're not like at some point they decided that that was what they're here to do. There's a decision in that, but there's also like I kind of like can't help it, you know? Like I can't really imagine doing anything else, or like if I didn't do that, I don't know what else I would do, or you know, or like some of this, like I think now I have to like work harder to finish songs or to create things, so I have to be more disciplined. But when I was younger, at least like a lot of the time the songs would just come out of me and I didn't even try to make them. I guess it took like 2 years or something to actually write and record the album, because we were also touring a lot and playing the songs live. And then it also took like almost another 2 years for it to come out. So it was like getting it released was also took a long time. We were like, and we used this Kickstarter, like crowd-supported fundraising thing to even be able to record. So that enabled us to do it ourselves, but we had a lot of support from people that like our music to do that. That was part of how it took a long time. It was just like, instead of having someone, like in our last record, we were signed to a major label, basically, through Thurston's label. So, and that also took like even long, like just the process of getting signed to that label took like over 2 years. And they were part of Universal Music Group, and like once Universal Music Group got involved, there was a time when it was like our record deal almost got canceled, and there was many months when we didn't hear anything, and then I don't know, it was a crazy process. I mean, I've been like going to see Sonic Youth play since I was like 13 or 14 years old, but a friend of ours from Massachusetts, from the town Northampton, which is where Thurston lives, I guess like is friends with his niece, and he just told me one day that I should send him some songs, and I did. And yeah, we made this 4-song demo and sent it to him, and he ended up like wanting to put out an album. And his record company is like called Ecstatic Peace, is a really amazing company that's basically a small independent label that puts out all this like noise music and really creative, non-commercial music. But he had a deal with Universal Music Group that allowed him to get funding to try to do certain things that were a little more commercial than just straight up noise. Like a lot of the stuff he puts out is just like static or like white noise, you know? But so a few like younger like rock bands, he got signed. They had like major label budgets that were still not like, I remember talking to people from the label when we were trying to get signed, and I was pretty like crazy at that time, but I was like, we need $1 million, give us $1 million, and they were just like, that's not how it is anymore, like you're insane. But even a few years before that, if we had been signed to a major label, maybe we would have gotten like $1 million. Like we were like one of the last, like, not to diss anyone else, but like one of the last real like underground bands to get that kind of a chance right at the time when that system or that like business is starting to die anyway. So they saw potential in us, but they also didn't have any idea how to market us, or I don't think that they really understood what it was about. The people at the big company, and like So pretty shortly after we got signed, the whole label, Thurston's whole label got dropped because it wasn't making any money. But I don't think that he was concerned at all with making money. He was just trying to expose people to stuff that he thought was cool. So it was a pretty amazing opportunity, but ultimately, yeah, I feel more natural doing it kind of on our own in a way.